In the cold expanse of the Variety sector, where glittering nebulae painted the darkness in ethereal hues, the human fleet hung like a quiet predator, largely ignored by the dominant powers of the galaxy, a web of empires that had long assumed the Sol system to be insignificant, a backwater, curious but unthreatening species, and yet beneath the placid blue of Earth's oceans and the chatter of satellites, humanity had been quietly advancing, not just in technology but in strategy, in unity, in the sheer capacity for adaptation that no alien civilization could truly comprehend. And when the first scouts of the Altherian Concord approached, their triangular ships slicing through the void like predatory insects, they found Earth's defenses strangely absent, almost too simple, a deliberate veneer of vulnerability. Commander Escher Lee watched from the bridge of the flagship Horizon as the alien fleet transmitted a message of expected compliance, a polite demand for tribute couched in diplomatic language, the holographic projection of the Concord's ambassador shimmering, its multilimb frame pulsating with what humans had learned to recognize as a sign of agitation. The crew exchanged glances, their hands resting lightly on the control panels, not in fear but in anticipation, because humanity had studied the Concorde for decades, understanding their tactics, their cultural arrogance, their reliance on intimidation, and now it was time to test the patience of those who had never regarded humans as equals. The first strike would not be weapons but perception, a demonstration of how deeply humanity had hidden its true capabilities. And when Lee gave the order, the Horizon initiated a subtle recalibration, not to attack but to project an array of quantum signatures that rendered the entire fleet's sensors erratic, lights blinking, shields misaligned, navigation disrupted, and in the chaos, the Concorde's admirals realized with dawning horror that they had underestimated their target, that the species they had laughed at, the species they had dismissed as primitive, was capable of manipulating physics in ways that defied their centuries of experience. While the aliens scrambled to regain control, the human fleet moved silently, each ship a node in a vast network of coordinated intelligence, every pilot aware of the other's intentions without a single word spoken. And as the first probe of the Horizon's new technology disrupted the main communications hub of the Altherian mothership, whispers of disbelief spread through the ranks of the Concorde, not understanding that Earth had not only prepared for this moment, but had studied every possible scenario the aliens could conjure, the culmination of generations of scientists, engineers, tacticians, and diplomats, all united in a single, elegant plan to reveal that the stars were no longer theirs to take for granted. That human ingenuity had created a web of contingency so intricate, it would leave even the most powerful fleets disoriented and vulnerable, and as the light from the nearest supernova glanced off the hulls of both human and alien vessels, there was a quiet tension, a moment suspended in time, before the first human message pulsed across the void in the native tongue of the Altherian ambassadors, simple, clear, and unavoidable. The Sol system does not negotiate with threats. The Sol system defines its own terms, and with that declaration, the galaxy began to realize that humanity had never been weak, that every assumed limitation was a miscalculation, and while the Altherian officers scrambled to respond, every human aboard the Horizon felt a strange calm, the kind born from knowing the depth of one's preparation, the precision of one's training, and the inevitability of the consequences to come, and in those seconds stretching into minutes, as alien vessels floundered under the elegant complexity of human strategy, the seeds of a new galactic order was sown, one in which humans were no longer the subjects of observation, the underestimated or the dismissed, but a force whose emergence would demand recognition, respect, and recalculation, for the galaxy had believed itself dominant, and now it would learn that the stars belonged not by right of conquest or arrogance, but by the unyielding will, adaptability, and brilliance of humanity. And as the horizon of the Variety sector glowed with the first spark of the human fleets, technological revelation, every ship and every mind aboard knew that the demonstration was only beginning, that what followed would reshape every political, military, and cultural assumption, and in that moment, Earth's quiet patience transformed into an undeniable presence, announcing without aggression yet with absolute clarity that the era of humans as background noise in galactic affairs had ended, and the stars, once thought owned by others, were now open to humanity's dominion. As the Altherian fleet floundered under the unforeseen interference, humans across the horizon and the accompanying vessel began implementing the next phase of their plan, a combination of strategic deception and precision engineering that would leave even centuries-old galactic powers scrambling to comprehend. Commander Eshelly coordinated with Admiral Marcus Patel and Chief Scientist Elena Rodriguez, their voices calm yet commanding, transmitting orders that rippled through the fleet as if choreographed by a single mind. Every ship altering its position to create a dynamic web of overlapping fields that not only shielded them from potential counterattacks but allowed for calculated strikes against the alien command vessels. And while the Concorde scrambled to reorganize, humans deployed probes capable of scanning, predicting, and subtly influencing alien navigation protocols, ensuring that every attempt by the enemy to coordinate would instead play into humanity's hands. Meanwhile, the first reconnaissance of other nearby galactic powers, unaware of the escalating situation, revealed ships of the Half-Act Dominion and the Cerulean Alliance, each observing the conflict from a safe distance, assuming the Altherian superiority would hold. Yet as sensors picked up the subtle but unmistakable manipulation of space-time around the human fleet, disbelief began to ripple outward, even in the minds of observers. The idea that humans could orchestrate such an elaborate display of coordinated tactics and technological dominance was almost unimaginable, and back aboard the horizon, Lee oversaw the careful calibration of the fleet's next maneuver, the Ghost Lattice, a sequence of rapid position shifts and sensor manipulations that would leave the Altherian ships unable to determine where attacks would originate or how to respond. It was as if the human vessel could occupy multiple positions simultaneously, a feat the aliens struggled to categorize within their limited understanding of physics and tactical doctrine, and as the first human strike pods moved silently toward the Altherian command hub, delivering targeted disruptions with non-lethal but highly incapacitating energy pulses, panic erupted across the alien bridge, officers arguing over rapidly conflicting data, the projection of their fleet commander flickering as the first signs of system-wide failures became apparent. Yet amidst the chaos, human pilots remained serene, their training and simulations having accounted for every conceivable reaction, and beyond the immediate battle, the implications began to spread like wildfire across the galaxy, every neutral observing species noting the sudden and undeniable revelation that humans were no ordinary civilization, that decades of assumed inferiority had been a catastrophic error in judgment. The Altherian High Council attempted to recalibrate, sending out emergency distress signals to the surrounding alliances, but the speed and sophistication of the human maneuvers rendered their messages ineffective, every attempt to intervene or influence the battlefield negated before it could manifest. And within hours, the strategic significance of humanity was no longer a secret confined to Earth or its immediate system, but a headline across interstellar networks, whispered in corridors of power, studied in war colleges, and debated in the halls of governments that had never thought twice about the Sol system. Meanwhile, Lee and her team initiated the next phase, subtle interventions in alien communications and navigation infrastructure, disabling critical functions without a single human life in jeopardy, a demonstration not of reckless aggression but of precise, measured superiority. And as the alien fleet struggled to regroup, fracturing under the realization of humanity's depth of preparation, the human fleet held formation, radiating a silent confidence that was almost tangible, a presence that declared, without words, without threats, that any empire considering Earth as a minor player would learn the hard way that underestimation had consequences far beyond imagination. And in those tense hours, as the first Altherian vessel began requesting surrender terms they did not understand the nature of, as distant observers recorded data they could barely interpret, the galaxy began to recalibrate its understanding of power, influence, and survival. And while humans remained poised, disciplined, and resolute, the universe collectively recognized a harsh truth. The stars, once dominated by arrogance and conquest, were entering a new era, an era defined not by the assumption of supremacy but by the quiet, deliberate, unstoppable dominion of humanity. As the echoes of the Altherian fleet's failure rippled across nearby sectors, word of humanity's unparalleled capabilities began to spread through a combination of intercepted communications, observational drones, and the subtle but unmistakable alterations in space-time signatures. Fleets from the Half-Act Dominion and Cerulean Alliance, initially content to remain neutral, now found themselves reassessing decades of assumptions about human potential, and while the galaxy reeled, the horizon, and its allied ships executed the next stage of their operation, not through brute force but through strategic dominance, projecting decoy fleets, deploying sensor cloaks, and leveraging humanity's deep understanding of alien psychology to manipulate enemy decisions in real time. Commander Eshali and Admiral Patel coordinated a sequence of maneuvers so complex that even human analysts had called it improbable during simulations. Yet in practice, it was flawless. The alien forces misjudged each move, rerouted ships into disadvantageous positions, and engaged in internal conflicts as differing factions within the Concorde argued over blame. While humans maintained absolute cohesion, the fleet operating as if guided by a single consciousness, Elena Rodriguez monitored the subtle energy fluctuations emanating from the Altherian vessels, noting with satisfaction how the humans' non-lethal systems were inducing systemic confusion, turning superior firepower into impotence. And across communication channels, intercepted messages revealed the growing desperation of the Altherian High Command as they scrambled to interpret actions that defied their centuries-old tactical doctrine, even minor errors cascading into catastrophic failures. And as the human fleet extended its influence, subtle interventions disrupted not only the Concorde but also adjacent star systems where opportunistic powers had begun mobilizing in anticipation of a conflict. These distant observers quickly realized that humans had a level of predictive intelligence and network coordination that exceeded any species they had encountered, and in private chambers across the galaxy, leaders convened emergency councils, debating how to respond to a civilization that had quietly grown in both strength and sophistication, one that had waited centuries to reveal its full potential. While on the horizon, Lee reviewed the results of initial engagements, noting the precision with which human strategies forced alien commanders into impossible dilemmas where any choice led to further disadvantage. Yet through all this, humanity acted with restraint, projecting power not to annihilate but to demonstrate capability, a calculated display designed to rewrite the rules of engagement, to make clear that aggression against Earth or its allies would carry consequences beyond comprehension. And in the corridors of the Concorde flagship, officers began to whisper betrayal by their own presumptions, their arrogance shattered by the reality that humans had anticipated every contingency, had prepared for every potential subterfuge, and had done so with a discipline and creativity that no alien mind had thought possible. Meanwhile, civilian scientists and diplomats on Earth coordinated with the fleet, ensuring that the strategic narrative, humanity as patient, deliberate, and overwhelmingly capable, was maintained even as military action unfolded, a psychological operation as vital as the physical maneuvers themselves. And as the first Altherian vessels began retreating under controlled human pressure, their systems compromised and their morale shattered, the galaxy collectively felt the magnitude of the shift, realizing that the age of humans as underestimated observers was over, that the species once dismissed as primitive now commanded respect, fear, and cautious admiration. And while the human fleet prepared for subsequent phases of engagement, Lee reflected on the centuries of preparation, of scientific breakthroughs, tactical innovations, and cultural cohesion that had made this moment possible, knowing that the true test of humanity's dominion was not merely in winning battles, but in demonstrating that the stars, once assumed to belong exclusively to alien empires, could now be navigated, defended, and governed by the ingenuity, will, and strategic brilliance of humankind. And in that quiet, calculated dominance, the first irreversible step toward a new galactic order had been taken, one in which every civilization would measure its ambitions against the unprecedented emergence of human power, and the universe, long accustomed to taking Earth lightly, was waking to a reality it could no longer ignore. As the human fleet pressed forward through the Verati sector, the initial shockwave of their intervention rippled across multiple star systems, compelling even the most distant observers to acknowledge that humanity had emerged not merely as a capable species, but as a civilization capable of dictating the terms of engagement for entire empires. Commander Eshali coordinated with field commanders across the horizon and its supporting fleet to implement the next phase, a series of maneuvers designed to isolate the Altherian Concorde from potential reinforcements, while simultaneously demonstrating the precision and depth of human tactical foresight. The fleet moved like a single organism, each ship anticipating the needs and actions of the others without communication, while scientists aboard monitored alien systems for vulnerabilities, exploiting the over-reliance of the Altherians on outdated sensor networks and rigid hierarchical command structures. And as probes disrupted, communications, and subtly altered energy signatures, panic among the alien ranks escalated, officers unable to comprehend the origin of each interference, while human strategists calculated with near-perfect accuracy the cascading effects of each move, ensuring that the Concorde's fleet became increasingly fragmented and ineffective without suffering casualties themselves. And in the midst of this, the half-act Dominion and Cerulean alliance, who had until now remained passive observers, began to reconsider alliances and strategies, recognizing that any engagement against humans without understanding their capabilities would likely result in catastrophic losses. While on the ground, humanity's diplomats ensured that intercepted transmissions painted a deliberate picture of restraint, mastery, and superior intelligence, reinforcing the impression that humans were not only militarily capable but also morally deliberate and technologically advanced. And as the Altherian fleet struggled to maintain cohesion, Lee initiated the first true demonstration of human ingenuity, the deployment of orbital constructs that manipulated local gravitational fields, creating navigational hazards and artificial choke points that funneled alien ships into predictable vectors, turning their own movement against them while leaving human vessels free to strike with surgical precision. The aliens, desperate and increasingly irrational, began to fracture internally, blaming each other for failures that were entirely the result of humanity's anticipation. And across the galaxy, news of these feats spread rapidly through intercepted communications, trading channels, and observation stations, sending waves of shock through governments, academies, and military councils that had long underestimated Earth. While back aboard the Horizon, Lee and her team reviewed the progress of the operation, noting with satisfaction that every measure of human planning, from psychological projection to technological superiority, was producing results far beyond initial expectations. And as the first Altherian command ship issued an uncoordinated surrender request, the humans continued their display, not immediately accepting, allowing the aliens to fully grasp the futility of their position, the calculated patience amplifying the psychological impact, and as the fleet maintained its dominance, strategically nudging the alien forces into compliance without excessive aggression, humanity's true message became clear across the sectors. They were no longer a species to be dismissed, no longer a backward to civilization, and no longer a neutral observer. Humans had emerged as a defining force, capable of controlling outcomes with precision, enforcing terms without unnecessary destruction, and projecting power in a way that demanded recognition from every galactic civilization. And as communications from other powers poured in, tentative inquiries, cautious warnings, and urgent requests for treaties, Lee recognized that the careful balance of demonstration and restraint had already begun reshaping political and military calculations across the galaxy, signaling that humanity's dominion was not achieved through brute force alone, but through unparalleled preparation, strategic intelligence, and the patient, deliberate unveiling of capabilities long underestimated by the empires that had once claimed the stars as their own. And in the silent corridors of the Horizon, the realization settled in among every crew member that they were not merely participants in this new era. They were the architect of it, the bearers of humanity's ascendancy, and the universe, wide and ancient as it was, had only just begun to comprehend the scale of the dominion that had quietly grown in the Sol system and now stretched outward, demanding recognition, respect, and adaptation from all who had once ignored it. With the Altherian fleet contained and disoriented, humanity's influence expanded rapidly across adjacent sectors, sending a clear signal that the stars were no longer theirs command unchallenged. Commander Esheley coordinated simultaneous maneuvers with Admiral Patel and the fleet's intelligence division, deploying subtle yet highly effective psychological operations alongside kinetic and electronic strategies, creating illusions of overwhelming numbers and unpredictable maneuvers that caused even the most experienced alien commanders to hesitate, while Orbital Construct manipulated gravitational fields to create natural bottlenecks, funneling enemy ships into vulnerable positions without a single direct confrontation. And as the half-act Dominion and Cerulean Alliance observed these displays, they realized that any attempt to engage or oppose humanity without careful diplomacy would be suicidal, prompting emergency summits across their respective capitals, where leaders debated alliances, surrender protocols, and unprecedented cooperation with a species they had long ignored. Back on the Horizon, Lee oversaw the deployment of human diplomats and emissaries who engaged with alien envoys to reinforce a perception of calculated restraint, ensuring that the emerging narrative was one of humans as deliberate intelligent, and supremely capable, while simultaneously, reconnaissance drones revealed hidden pockets of resistance across multiple systems, remnants of Altherian loyalists attempting to regroup, and human strategists devised non-lethal but incapacitating strikes, disabling ships, communication arrays, and navigation systems with precision, demonstrating dominance without unnecessary destruction, emphasizing to the galaxy that humanity wielded power not for conquest but for enforcement of order and protection of those who could not defend themselves. And as the Altherians attempted desperate countermeasures, they found themselves ensnared in a web of human planning, each choice anticipated, each maneuver counted, while reports from the edge of the Harthak and Cerelian territories indicated that even their fleets were beginning to adopt more cautious postures, recalibrating doctrines that had assumed superiority over a species they had long dismissed as inconsequential. Simultaneously, the cultural impact of humanity's emergence spread, influencing not only military planning but commerce, research, and interstellar policy, as humans demonstrated mastery over both technological and strategic domains, and across every sector touched by the horizon and its allied vessels. Stories of human ingenuity, patience, and decisive action created a ripple effect, a psychological dominance that reinforced the physical, while Lee and Patel coordinated with Earth's scientific community to initiate the next phase, demonstrations of humanity's advanced propulsion, energy, and computational systems that defied existing galactic models, challenging alien theories of physics, engineering, and even biology, forcing their best minds to acknowledge that Earth had quietly surpassed expectations by centuries. And as these capabilities became evident in controlled demonstrations, neighboring civilizations began petitioning for formal alliances, defensive agreements, and knowledge exchanges, recognizing that cooperation with humanity was no longer optional but essential for survival. And in these moments, as human crews executed flawless tactical displays, projected strategic influence, and demonstrated unprecedented technological mastery, the universe collectively acknowledged that the stars had shifted, that the dominion of humanity was not a threat imposed recklessly but a reality born of centuries of preparation, disciplined execution, and the patient unveiling of capabilities long underestimated. And while the Altherian remnants struggled to salvage their reputation, humanity's message resonated through every channel, every fleet, and every planetary government. The era of humans as observers was over, and now, with deliberate precision and undeniable power, they commanded the respect, fear, and cooperation of the galaxy, ensuring that any who wished to challenge or ignore them would first have to reckon with a full measure of human ingenuity, strategy, and dominance. And in that quiet yet unmistakable assertion of supremacy, a new chapter of interstellar history began, one defined not by the arrogance of old empires, but by the deliberate, unstoppable, and intelligent rise of humanity. As the shock of human dominance reverberated through the Verati sector and beyond, the Altherian remnants and neighboring powers scrambled desperately to comprehend the scale of what had been unleashed. Commander Escher Lee oversaw the execution of a complex, multi-layered operation designed not just to neutralize threats, but to demonstrate the breadth and depth of human capability. Fleets moved with precision that defied alien expectations, employing gravitational manipulation, electronic disruption, and predictive coordination that made every countermeasure seem irrelevant, while Earth's Scientific Council fed real-time data and simulations to the fleet, ensuring that every potential scenario was anticipated and every reaction accounted for. And as human ships projected decoy fleets and adaptive maneuvers, alien commanders found themselves trapped in a web of strategy so intricate that even the most sophisticated AI could not parse it fully. The Altherians' desperation grew, their once confident communications devolving into panic as they realized that their centuries of presumed superiority were illusions, and simultaneously, the Harthak and Cerelian observers began sending urgent requests for dialogue, treaties, and access to the knowledge humanity had demonstrated, acknowledging, often with reluctance, that they had miscalculated the Sol system entirely. While the human fleet maintained a disciplined calm, each vessel acting in concert to apply controlled pressure, demonstrating dominance without unnecessary annihilation, highlighting humanity's unique blend of strategic patience and overwhelming capability. And as the first coordinated strikes of the Ghost lattice and quantum field projections reached critical mass, the Altherian flagship, once the symbol of their supremacy, experienced complete systemic collapse, engines failing, communications jammed, and shields fluctuating uncontrollably, while human engineers monitored every fluctuation to ensure no permanent destruction occurred beyond what was necessary to enforce compliance. And as the alien crew scrambled to respond, it became clear that their dominance had ended, that humanity had rewritten the rules of engagement, and that the stars, long assumed to be owned by the arrogant and the overconfident, now belonged to those who had prepared, studied, and executed with patience and brilliance simultaneously. Diplomatic channels opened across multiple sectors, alien governments requesting counsel, alliances, and protections, recognizing that cooperation with humanity was now imperative, while Lee coordinated the final phase of demonstration, projecting holographic maps, showing potential outcomes, and subtly manipulating environmental controls in alien fleets to force surrender or compliance without total destruction. And as the first Altherian representatives capitulated, acknowledging terms they could not resist, the galaxy collectively realized that the era of human underestimation had ended, that patience, innovation, and unity had produced a species capable of not just surviving but dominating through intellect, preparation, and strategy. And as a horizon and its fleet glided through the Variety sector with a calm authority, every observer across the galaxy understood that humanity's dominion was not merely a temporary shift but a permanent restructuring of power, a revelation of capability that would be studied, respected, and feared for generations. And while Earth remained committed to measured restraint, the message was unmistakable. The stars, once thought claimed by alien arrogance, were now open to human stewardship, guided by strategy, innovation, and the unyielding determination that had transformed the once-dismissed species into a defining force of the galaxy. And in those quiet moments aboard the horizon, as systems stabilized, calculations confirmed, and allied fleets coordinated seamlessly, humanity had achieved something no other species had done before, asserting dominion through precision, foresight, and intellect, forever altering the balance of interstellar civilization and announcing to all the age of humans as the underestimated underdogs had ended, replaced by the era of deliberate, undeniable, and irreversible human supremacy. With the Altherian fleet neutralized and their remnants surrendering under carefully controlled terms, the galaxy began to adjust to the irreversible reality of humanity's ascendancy. Commander Eshelly oversaw the final phase of the operation, not through combat but through consolidation, coordination, and demonstration of governance, the human fleet acting as both protector and enforcer, ensuring that alien powers could no longer exploit misunderstandings, arrogance, or inaction, while simultaneously, Earth's diplomatic corps reached out to every major civilization, extending terms that emphasized cooperation, knowledge exchange, and respect, yet leaving no room for miscalculation or aggression. And as Harthak, Cerellian, and remaining Altherian leaderships realized that the humans' patience, intelligence, and technological mastery were not anomalies but the product of centuries of preparation, a wave of grudging respect swept through the galaxy, reshaping politics, trade, and cultural perception almost overnight. While on the horizon and across human fleets, crews carried out the final demonstrations of control, stabilizing sectors, disabling hazardous zones, and implementing orbital constructs that would serve as both protective measures and symbols of human capability, and in every sector touched by humanity, from frontier world to imperial capitals, messages were sent and received detailing the careful restraint, strategic brilliance, and technological superiority that had secured human dominance without unnecessary bloodshed, proving to every observer that humans were not conquerors in traditional sense but masters of strategy, foresight, and ethical power projection. And as the final Altherian vessels accepted terms that preserved life yet ensured accountability, the galaxy collectively acknowledged that the era of underestimation was over, that the species once dismissed as primitive now commanded not only respect but authority over interstellar policy, security, and cooperation, while Earth itself became the central node of galactic influence, not through force alone but through demonstration of competence, cohesion, and ingenuity. And as Leah reviewed the results, noting the alignment of military, diplomatic, and scientific efforts across multiple star systems, she understood that humanity had achieved something unprecedented, a permanent, sustainable dominion based on excellence, patience, and the calculated unveiling of capability. And as transmissions from formerly skeptical or hostile civilizations arrived requesting alliances, knowledge sharing, and strategic cooperation, humanity's role as a central, respected, and formidable force in the galaxy was solidified, ensuring that no power would dare underestimate the species again. And while the stars themselves remained vast and unclaimed in absolute terms, the balance of influence, respect, and deterrence had shifted irreversibly, a testament to human ingenuity, determination, and a unique combination of restraint and decisiveness that had allowed a single species to rise quietly, patiently, and inexorably from obscurity to command the attention, allegiance, and awe of the galaxy. And as the horizon sailed through the Verati sector, its crew silent but proud, the realization settled over every human present that history had been rewritten, the universe forever changed, and the stars, once thought dominated by arrogance, conquest, and alien supremacy, now belonged to those who had earned them through strategy, unity, and the unyielding will of humanity, marking the dawn of an era in which humans would shape the destiny of the galaxy, not as aggressors, but as undeniable masters of their own fate and architect of a new interstellar order.